Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. And Jim and I have debated a little bit about how to describe these. You could say they're both good and bad/crazy. Good that we know about them now. Bad that they ever occurred in the first place. But some excellent work in discovering problems with the State Department under John Kerry, NIH under Anthony Fauci, big surprise, and of course, Hunter Biden. Jim, let's begin with your great inspiration, John Kerry, who you really do have to thank in some dystopian way for making you a household name back during the 2004 campaign. But as it turns out now, thanks to whistleblowers and Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley making this revelation, I believe yesterday, that because John Kerry was so insistent on getting this Iran nuclear deal in place, that he basically thwarted Justice Department efforts to prosecute Iranians committing criminal activity here in the United States. Here's a critical part of what the senators revealed. Quote, for example, unclassified FBI email records from August 25th, 2017 detailed at least 8 instances connected to the Iran deal where the FBI, DOJ, USG could have moved forward with the cases, but the State Department chose to block them. According to the records, in 6 of these instances, the FBI lost the opportunity to arrest the main subject. The email says that one of the lost main subjects was noted to be on the terrorism watch list and another returned to Iran. The email further says that in another instance, the State Department blocked the FBI's plan to arrest while the subject was mid-flight, and the subject was forced to leave the U.S. immediately upon arrival. The email also provides that at least 2 targets were arrested only after the State Department lifted their block. And why? Because Trump was in office by that time, and Kerry couldn't pull the strings or the levers or what have you at that point. So literally running interference against criminal activity, including people on the terrorism watch list, to get his beloved toothless Iran nuclear deal off to a good start from his perspective.
This is all detailed in the emails within the FBI. You can see printouts and screenshots of those printouts over at the website of Senators Johnson and Grassley. Good work to both of them. By the way, Chuck Grassley, for all of our complaints about old politicians, getting it done at his old age. He issued this report and then, challenged somebody to a push-up contest and won. That's good job, Chuck. Stand up, Chuck, as the president would say. And Chuck Grassley can stand up. You might be, why would the State Department, why would the Secretary of State try to protect Iranians on the terror watch list? Why would they try to protect stop the FBI from arresting these people? And I just look at, John Kerry's career, the dinner with Syrian dictator Bashir Assad, chumming around with Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, his claim that if Russia, did more on emissions, the world would feel better about their invasion of Ukraine. Like, this is really consistent with everything else John Kerry has done in foreign policy over the course of his career. And so this is not some wildly uncharacteristic decision. This is how he operates. He loves dictators. He's absolutely convinced, if you put me in a room with them, I can get them to reasonable positions, and it'll always work out and everything will be hunky-dory. So it's not the least bit surprising. That really no reason to think anybody in the FBI would make this stuff up. It's not shocking to think that there were some people in the State Department who are like, negotiations with Tehran are so fragile right now, we can't do anything. We can't have anything up, shaking up the apple cart. And so we have to, make sure that, nobody gets arrested. No, we can't do anything like that. It's also very believable that the FBI would say, who cares? These guys are on the terror watch list. These guys are helping the Iranian nuclear program. Our job is to stop these guys. Why are you not allowing us to do this? But there's a detail in this. And I went back and I checked, Greg. So apparently, back in 2004, during the illustrious days of the Kerry spot, you may have heard, and I want to say it was James Toronto got this started, but that John Kerry was haughty and French looking. I emphasize, not a hottie, haughty, meaning arrogant and smug and condescending, and if you see the kind of person who feels the need to explain the word haughty, for example. And so somebody looked it up. Apparently, 40,000 times, if you put into a Google search, you would see references to John Kerry being haughty. And you might be like, oh, this is just, the Bush campaign and messaging and all that stuff. No. Let's go back to the example. When the Principals Committee ended, Kerry packed up his stuff and rushed out without engaging with the Attorney General at all. The issues remain unresolved. That's pretty haughty. That is now textbook definition of haughty. There is no longer any controversy over this. The jury is still out on whether or not John Kerry looks French. He's not French, by the way. His heritage, but also ironically, his heritage is not Irish. His heritage is actually Czech Jewish, and his ancestors, changed to Catholicism a few years back. But anyway, but the point being that John Kerry, this is completely in keeping with him. And it's just a representative of the people who are in the administration now. About the only thing you can say for John Kerry is that he's not literally on the payroll of the Iranian government, which was in fact the case for several State Department advisors under the Biden administration.
Yeah, Robert Malley. I guess a minor hats off to Loretta Lynch, who was Attorney General at the time. This is the first time I've ever seen her or heard about her standing up vigorously against John Kerry or really any other policy in the Obama years. But, we talk about, and correctly so, the old Bob Gates statement about Joe Biden being wrong about everything for 40 years and now 50 years. John Kerry, whatever his position is on an international issue, you can pretty much take it to the bank that it's not one that we're going to like. And he also, don't forget, had these personal ties to the foreign minister of Iran. I can't remember the exact marriage that occurred. So he is intertwined with the Iranians in a very compromising and potentially compromising and disturbing way.
For what it's worth, the Iranian foreign minister said in an interview that John Kerry had shared information with him about how often the Israelis had attacked, Iranian assets in Syria, something like 200 times. Kerry denied sharing any of that information and classified information. I suppose it could be just the Iranians making trouble. I don't understand why they would want to, hurt the reputation of John Kerry, who's like their best friend in the U.S. government. Who benefits from that? Certainly not the Iranians, nor does John Kerry. Look, for a long time on this podcast, Greg, you and I have been criticizing Kerry, and I believe we've done it in a manner reminiscent of Genghis Khan, cutting off ears, cutting off heads. Genghis. Only the Philistines pronounce it Genghis, Greg.
No, that's exactly correct. And I believe it is on the record that he was telling the Iranians during the Trump years, just wait. Don't worry about this. Yeah.
We'll be back.
We'll be back and just hold on for a few years. If that had happened the other way, the Democrats would be screaming about, I don't know, the Logan Act or whatever happens every...
Somebody made the argument that the Logan Act gets invoked anytime anybody on the right side of the spectrum ever meets with a foreign leader. But if you're going to enforce the Logan Act, then John Kerry comes really close, probably comes closest to trying to negotiate a separate peace or offering a different deal to foreign leaders as opposed to whoever happens to be the president at the time.
Thank you, Ohio, by the way, for making sure that John Kerry is never president of the United States.
On this podcast, we're fans of Die Bold and Die Hard.
Awesome. All right. Lumen, great new sponsor to this show. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism just through your breath. Literally, all you have to do is breathe. And then on the app, also easy to set up, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. But because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health can translate to a whole bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep.
You want something that's going to help you and something that's going to be easy to use. So we've talked about just breathing into it. We've talked about simply doing it once a day and then following the advice based on whether it senses that you're burning carbs or fats at that time. And then it has other features you can use, but it really is that simple to use on a daily basis. Check it out. If you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me and use 3ml to get $100 off your Lumen. That is lumen.me, and use 3ML at checkout for $100 off. Again, that's lumen.me, code 3ML. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, we've talked about the revelations exposed by, whistleblowers from the FBI, Justice Department, that were revealed on the Senate side. Then we have what the House is doing, and they were holding hearings yesterday related to, really, the online cover-up of government records at the National Institutes of Health during the COVID crisis, and specifically how it related to the growing theories and successful and accurate theories, mind you, that EcoHealth Alliance, which was funded with NIH money, was up to its neck in research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But of course, when that was first brought up in 2020, Anthony Fauci came out with a giant bucket of cold water and tried to make the story go away. It was only as time went on that it became undeniable. So yesterday on the House side, we had this guy, David Morenz, testifying, and he either is or was the operations director at the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases. So basically working side by side with Anthony Fauci. And there's this whole series of different emails about how to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIAs as they're popularly known. So here's one email. I forgot to say there's no worry about FOIAs. I can either send stuff to Tony, that's Fauci, on his private Gmail or hand it to him at work or at his house. He's too smart to let colleagues send him stuff that could cause trouble. Then there's also him admitting that he deleted a bunch of stuff from Peter Daszak, the guy from EcoHealth Alliance, because he says that's what we do when blank hits the fan. Then there's other emails where he talks about the lady who's in charge of responding to FOIA requests but hates FOIAs, that has tips on how to avoid complying with FOIAs, which is also a crime. But here are a couple of quick clips. Brad Wenstrup, the Republican congressman who is chairman of the committee that this testimony happened at yesterday, trying to get Morenz to elaborate on him telling colleagues that he has a back channel to Fauci, meaning outside of the normal government communication system.
Did you ever send information related to COVID-19 to Dr. Fauci's personal email?
I don't remember if I did. I may have, but I certainly told him some things that he asked me to tell him about the situation with Peter.
Thank you. On May 13th, 2021, you wrote that you connected a reporter to Dr. Fauci via your secret back channel. What back channel did you have for Dr. Fauci?
Well, all these terms like secret back channel and the other one you mentioned were just jokes. Just, jokes that I made in dealing with Peter because he was under death threats and was very depressed. And it was sort of the group of people who were Peter's friends were trying to cheer him up by making snarky jokes and euphemisms that were, not true. But there was no back channel.
I connected a reporter to Dr. Fauci through a back channel. Jim, that's hilarious. That's just absolutely going to brighten your day. It's very similar to the Clinton folks after Sandy Berger got caught smuggling classified documents at the archives. Oh, that's Sandy. He's just, what a guy, what a card. But it wasn't just the Republicans. The Democrats yesterday, even Kwesi Mfume of Maryland, telling Morenz, as he tried to gobble up Mfume's time and dodging the questions, that this was just a train wreck.
I'm sorry, I'm getting this echo here, and should I turn off my microphone?
Yeah, you're using my time. Let me ask you, why didn't you report any of this to the ethics office?
I don't know. I didn't. I don't even know what our ethics office does, but Peter certainly reported. Peter reported it to the FBI.
I'm not worried about Peter. I'm talking about you. Peter's not here. I just want to know if you thought this was ethically incorrect or improper, why didn't you report it to the ethics office?
What are you referring to as what being ethically improper?
Well, you just said you asked him why was he sending this to one email account when it should have gone to another one.
And you're asking me whether I thought what he was doing was unethical? What I was doing is unethical?
Sir, I think you're going to be haunted by your testimony today.
Koizumi is not usually someone who's going to be someone we applaud, but even he can't stomach what Morenz was trying to shovel there. So, Jim, I don't know if they're going to take it out on him to try to protect Fauci in terms of the Democratic approach here, but it's so obvious what they were doing to try to eliminate the chance for transparency about what EcoHealth Alliance and a whole lot of other things that were going on here.
Greg, how long have we been doing this podcast? 13 years? 14 years?
Almost 14 years, yeah.
Almost 14 years. In 14 years, I don't know if I have ever been so tempted to create more work for you by screaming four-letter words and saying, I'm going to say, that's horse pucky, but I really don't want to say pucky. I like, no, I am the Will Ferrell gif, I don't believe you. I am the gif on the video game, press X for doubt. I doubt when you say, oh, we're just joking about how we have all these secret back channels. Bull crap. That's as clean as I can keep it, because no, I do not believe you. That is absolutely utterly implausible. Finally, the line, I don't know what our ethics office does. Not much, apparently. Apparently, it's just the easiest job in Washington, being the ethics officer at NIH, because here's this guy is like, on the other, like this, all of this was shocking. Maybe the detail that like jumps, like, okay, there's a lot of stuff in there, and I try to go through all of it in the morning jolt. But the point that there's a FOIA lady at the National Institute of Health who will help you write stuff and help you delete it before it gets searched in response to the FOIA request. Like, what is she, the anti-FOIA lady? What is her job, to like hide things from the FOIA? This is like appointing the Red Skull to run the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. This is just pointing the absolute worst person for the job that they have. Because the whole, okay, you want to save these people. Do you know what the Freedom of Information Act is, right? If you're a government employee, everything you're doing is paid for by the taxpayers. Therefore, the taxpayers have access to everything you do unless they got a real darn good reason to not do it. And it's basically national security, stuff that is completely entirely related to human resources, stuff that has no discernible public interest, stuff that's covered by attorney-client privilege, or stuff that's covered by someone. Generally, it's national security stuff. And so when he said in another one of these emails where they say the Office of the General Counsel, the lawyers at NIH have told the FOIA department, don't respond to anything with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Oh, really? There's no public interest in any of this? Amidst the biggest global pandemic in 100 years, there's no public interest there? The only way you could then justify that, other than, it's not like attorney-client privilege is going to come into any of this stuff. So the only thing that would apply is national security. I ask you, dear listeners, why would it be in the United States national security interest to not disclose any of the interactions between the National Institute of Health and the Wuhan Institute of Virology when the Wuhan Institute of Virology was using U.S. taxpayer funding money to do gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses? But anyway, so the idea that the FOIA lady sees her job as hiding things and not cooperating. Look, you don't have to be a crazy right-winger. No less than Kenneth Vogel, who writes for the New York Times, tweeted just a little bit about an hour before we started taping. Having struggled for years with federal FOIA officers who seem more inclined to obfuscate and delay rather than facilitate the release of public records, this rare glimpse into the mindset and tactics of one officer is disturbing. Makes me wonder how common these tactics are. Look, I'm sure Kenneth Vogel's written stuff I've disagreed with, and probably vice versa, but we are ready to be that meme of the arms being enclasped. Yes, I am with you on this, Kenneth Vogel. I think the U.S. government, left, right, and center, all kinds of federal agencies, I think they ignore FOIA requests all the time. I wonder where they learned that from. Hillary Clinton. Oh, but her emails. Here we are, years later, amidst the biggest public health crisis in U.S. history, and we're seeing the exact same thing. Use our personal accounts so that this can't be FOIA'd because we don't want the public knowing what we're actually saying to each other. That is not the way the government is supposed to work. That is a violation of the law, and every one of these guys should have their hides nailed to the wall over it.
Well said. Very well said. Jim, you were tempted to use four-letter words in response to this. What kind of language do you think was happening in the upper offices at NIH when reports from you and others started coming out about the fact that this probably was a lab leak? Panic City.
Yeah, reading through these emails, I was quick to note, there are a couple, you get some of the conversation before, the long email chains, right? And they talked about lab leak accident and deliberate bioterrorism, genetically engineered, attack on America. And they conflated it, just like everybody else. Now, these guys are allegedly the best of the best. These are the ones who are running U.S. policy in response to this. And even they felt the need to act like a lab accident had to be treated as a deliberate Chinese attack. I've never bought into that because too many Chinese suffered. They did too much economic damage to China. Even in the most... Now, by the way, I do think it's conceivable that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was doing research that was illegal, that was on biological weapons. It's conceivable. There's a lot of stuff that is, let's just say, looks really suspicious about what we know about Chinese, let's just call dual-use biological research programs. Yeah, the more you study viruses, the more you know how to fight them. But the more you study viruses, the more you know how to weaponize them. And so I think it's not the craziest theory there. I don't know if I've not seen anything that strikes me as smoking gun evidence that there was a bioweapons program inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But anyway, that's, my suspicion is that they dismissed me as a conspiracy theorist and everybody else reporting on this as a conspiracy theorist. Even though all I'm saying is one day somebody didn't wear the protective gear the right way, inhaled something, goes home, kisses the wife, goes to shop at the seafood market or something, and then all of a sudden this virus is off and running. That's not a conspiracy theory. The closest thing to a conspiracy theory is that the Chinese government covered up what went wrong, but that's so unlike them.
Yeah, the World Health Organization was running cover for China as well. So the NIH obviously trying to cover up its own connections and funding of gain-of-function research, but I think also trying to preserve the relationship with communist China, both of which are completely inexcusable, not to mention the fact that they're flagrantly violating federal law, and the emails are proof of the conspiracy here to do so. So, all right, let's talk about Z-Biotics, because I'm sure some of those folks at NIH went home in their quarantine and tipped a few when they found out that this was coming to light. They should have had Z-Biotics, though, because they would have had at least a nicer morning in terms of their overall physical health. And the reason for that is that Z-Biotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink, and it's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic to help you feel better the next morning.
When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. So if you just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, let's not forget that, and then you're going to feel your best the following morning.
If you do drink responsibly and you have Z-Biotics as that first drink, your next morning will be much, much better than it would be without it. So go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our third martini, and this one comes to us courtesy of the House Ways and Means Committee. I know this is going to shock you, so good thing you've already written about it today, but it turns out that sometimes Hunter Biden doesn't tell the truth. I'm going to give you a moment to just digest that because I know it's going to come as a huge shock. But a couple of examples here. First of all, before I toss it to you, he said in testimony that this guy, Raymond Zhao, who has been in the crosshairs of the committee's work, he says this message that I sent to is not the Zhao that's connected to the CEFC. And the one I did talk to had no understanding or even remotely knew what the bleep I was even bleep talking about. The truth. According to phone records of Hunter Biden's WhatsApp messages released by the Ways and Means Committee, the president's son communicated with only one Zhao, Raymond Zhao, in that exchange. And not only did the same Zhao respond, but his message indicates that he knew exactly what Hunter Biden was talking about and that Hunter Biden continued to communicate with the same Zhao phone number for an additional 3 months related to the CEFC. And then also he says, and again, we're getting into the weeds of his tangled business associations here, but Hunter Biden, according to the committee, testified neither Rosemont Seneca Bohai nor its associated accounts were, quote, under my control nor affiliated with me. And he, quote, didn't even know there was such a thing as a corporate secretary of the entity. The truth. Evidence obtained by the committee and released today from IRS investigator Joseph Ziegler shows otherwise. Not only is there documentation that Hunter Biden was the beneficial owner of a bank account in the name of Rosemont Seneca Bohai, but the committee has obtained a signed document where Hunter Biden affirms, I, Robert Hunter Biden, hereby certify that I am the duly elected, qualified, and acting secretary of Rosemont Seneca Bohai, LLC. So good job, House Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah, in all three of these examples put out by the House Ways and Means Committee, these are cases in which the statements from Biden were definitive, were clear. He wasn't indicating, I don't remember. These were very sweeping statements. I never did X. And then the committee has found, no, here's evidence that you did X. This was not the right guy. Yes, in fact, this was either, yes, you dialed the wrong guy, but then you kept using that number for the next 3 months and having long conversations with him. So no, I don't think this was a wrong number. I knew nothing about Rosemont Seneca Bohai. Here's a document in which you certify that you are the duly elected, qualified, and acting secretary. I never did any work as related to visas. Here's the emails indicating you worked on visas. As you mentioned, this is probably the least surprising of the three things we're talking about today. But, Hunter Biden apparently really is the kind of person who thinks that he could BS Congress and would either forget about or just be able to somehow downplay or dismiss the fact that everything you're saying can be checked against phone records, text messages, legal documents, emails, stuff like that. So, okay, people are like, oh, big deal, Hunter Biden. Like, yeah, okay, he did it under oath to Congress. And if you're like, well, okay, well, who cares, big deal. Well, all right. Peter Navarro was Trump's top trade policy advisor. I disagree with this guy on a whole bunch of stuff, but he refused to cooperate with a subpoena from the House committee that was investigating January 6th. Now, you give me a choice between jail time and cooperating with subpoena, I'm going to cooperate with subpoena. He chose otherwise, and he's now in jail. He's going to be doing a 4-month sentence down in the federal penitentiary down in Miami. Navarro's 74 years old. This is not a violent criminal. This is not some, axe murderer, but he broke the law, and the Department of Justice prosecuted him, put him, and convicted him. If we can do that for a 74-year-old man for failure to cooperate with a subpoena, why would we exempt the president's son when he lies to Congress multiple times? And like I said, these three, and there may well be more, but in his testimony, these are three in which it's about as close as you're going to find to as a smoking gun. So we'll see what happens. But so 2 points, two kind of closing thoughts. The first one we talked about today came from GOP senators. The last two came from Republican House majorities and House committees. A lot of people complain about Republicans in the House, and they're a very small minority. And look, they got some clowns among them. They got some real flawed ones. It's Mike Johnson has his hands full, and he's doing, I think, the best he can in a really challenging job. But for people who are like, what difference does it make? Well, this is the difference it makes. Republicans no one was learning about any of these things when Democrats controlled the House, because Democrats had no interest in investigating them, right? Today's podcast, 3 big scoops, 3 big consequential facts. John Kerry protected Iranian terrorists. Fauci and his aides were conspiring to avoid FOIA and to hide information from the American people. And Hunter Biden lied under oath 3 times. Those are big deals, and you don't find out about that, at least the last 2, if you don't have Republicans controlling the House. So that just, first of all, good job, House Republicans. I don't get to say that very often. That's what they're. And then just finally, in light of this, I don't find it shocking people don't care about Trump allegedly falsifying business records to cover up hush money to Stormy Daniels. It's certainly unethical. It certainly makes him look bad. It makes him look, really sleazy. But I'm not convinced it's a crime. It certainly doesn't seem like it's a felony. It seems like he's ludicrously overcharged, and that the evidence of that second crime is sketchy. And people are like, we all knew about this Trump anyway. We all knew, nobody's shocked by this. So in a world where there are big lies about actual public policies and consequences, the idea that people are going to, why aren't people matter at Trump? Because they think everybody lies. And the examples of John Kerry, Fauci and his aides, and Hunter Biden offer a lot of, supporting evidence for that cynical viewpoint.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Good job by, again, the lawmakers for bringing this to light. Elections do have consequences, even though sometimes they do disappoint you on the floor in a number of different ways on what does get passed, what doesn't get passed, the deals you got to strike. But the power of committees to investigate is a critical power, and the power to subpoena witnesses, of course, before the committee, which they've done as well. And so many things have come to light, Afghanistan and then issues like this as well. So, Jim, excellent work on your part. Made for great prep for today's podcast. And we will do it again tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
and it will be Friday. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Do subscribe to our podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends to join us as well. We'd love to have them. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play Three Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next Three Martini Lunch.